Last year, TAPA EMEA recorded cargo thefts from supply chains in 56 countries in the EMEA region, emphasising the scale of the threat to the security of high-value theft-targeted goods moving in supply chains. Protecting products in Eastern Europe is a particular challenge, and this is the subject our next speaker is particularly well qualified to address. Mike Pyszczymuka of Pinkerton Consulting and Investigation is a former member of the US government's Senior Executive Service, with over 25 years of experience as an FBI special agent, including 15 years of experience supervising investigations in foreign counterintelligence, Russian organized crime, international terrorism, general criminal investigations, and crisis management. Today, he will share his experience of working in Eastern Europe and EMEA and discuss risks to the safe and reliable movement of goods, as well as providing a snapshot of recent cargo theft intelligence and previous case experiences. Mike is joining us from the US, and Mike, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Thank you. Let me start with thanking everyone for the invitation and the opportunity to present this morning to a group that is extremely valuable to the freight property movement industry. My name is Michael Pyszczymuka. I'm a Pinkerton dedicated professional. That means I am exclusively assigned to a company, in this instance, pharmaceutical company, and I'm attached directly to their global security team. Let me just tell you about Pinkerton in brief. Alan Pinkerton was a Scottish cooper who immigrated from Scotland to the U.S. and wound up in Dundee, Illinois. There, he got involved in law enforcement when he reported on some criminals to the local sheriff. Hence, he started his career. He's probably best known for his other activities. He was an abolitionist, and his home in Dundee was used as part of the Underground Railroad. So, pretty unique background. He also helped provide escort for Lincoln's train that traveled from Illinois to Washington, D.C. For the first inauguration. In a lot of ways, there's been stories told that Pinkerton and the way he set up his agency was like a precursor to the U.S. Secret Service. I don't know how accurate that is, but I would not be surprised. I want to thank also the people I work with at Pinkerton. I partner with Herb Simon, and we work very closely on the pharma company account, handling the plethora of responsibilities and duties. I report to Director Michelle Ariano, who heads up the New York region, and also to Dan Farrell, who's the managing director in the Northeast. In this instance, I want to particularly thank the EMEA team, and Klaus Pfeiffer is the managing director for Europe, and Joanna Poczesniak is the operational manager in Poland. And we've had some interesting cases in regards to missing loads in Poland. So let me continue on to the next slide. Got that right. All right, supply chain security and TAPA. You are all obviously professionals and understand the necessity to have your partners and in your conveyance routing to be secured and to follow certain guidelines and procedures and to have adequate security considerations at their entities. I just want to talk about it, and I should have changed the slide just a little bit. protecting the conveyance of transportable assets. Well, the company I work for is very strict about conducting supply chain security surveys, and it's brought about an incredible response from the vendors that they deal with, tightened up the entire supply chain, where we can say that they are one of the 4 or 5 companies that manufacture the C-19 vaccine, and in thousands of shipments, millions of doses going out of North America to the world, or from Europe to other parts of EMEA. We haven't had one stolen load. So it's a testament to the global security team that I'm attached to, and the heavy duty supply chain auditing that is being done. You have to know your parties, and in this particular instance, the client, a pharma company, has an excellent relationship with Pinkerton, who are inside the global security team, and an organization called Resolver, which is situated in Canada. We've been able to create amazing platforms to be able to audit just about every type of conveyance or warehouse or entity that touches our product. Let me just go back to the pharma industry and how they approached security through collaboration, and this started 2008, 2009 setting, and it was a large load of pharmaceutical drugs valued over $10 million that was stolen down in the southeast of the United States. It was a huge incident for this company, which is probably in the top 4 or 5 in the pharma industry. So what happened is there was a collective response of security directors from many companies getting together to discuss what can we do to improve our status. And the pharma industry then created an entity, and it was led by some great people, and I think one of them is a speaker, or will be a speaker at this top of the event, Charles Forsyth, and it was the Pharmaceutical Cargo Security Council. And to that council belonged in excess of 30 companies. And they rolled up their sleeves and decided to change the dynamics and not to be embarrassed and not to suffer the reputational injury that a loss of product would cause, and plus the damage it does to the actual product and in the end to protect the patient, which is the bottom line. So they created the council, and with the leadership of some excellent vice presidents, to include Kevin Donovan, who led Johnson & Johnson Global Security at that time. They decided to seriously address everything from how to improve the security status and position of all their vendors, but also how to adjust the legislation so that it would be more severe for people that stole pharmaceutical cargo, as opposed to just appliances or electronics or whatever, because of the threat to patient safety once the drugs get out into the underworld. Also, there were other large events during that time. In 2010, March 14th, in Enfield, Connecticut, there was a burglary of a large Eli Lilly facility, and in excess of $70 million of product was stolen. Again, I clearly remember that weekend because it was a northeastern windstorm, rainstorm that knocked out power and everything else. And what happened is burglars who had basically conducted surveillance of this facility were able to break in through the roof and escape with an excess of $70 million worth of product. Eventually, they were captured because one of the crooks, one of the thieves, left fingerprints and DNA on a cup that was left behind. But it basically demonstrated again how there need to be numerous redundancies built into a warehouse setting where you lose your power. Even if you have a generator, you need to be able to go out and contact the people to respond. In that instance, there were a couple of people that never picked up their phones. So a lot of these events caused the industry to really tighten down, and some companies just took it to another level. Just a little bit about myself, and you might find this. By the way, this slide should have been cleaned up a little bit. My apologies, but we were going back and forth, and one of my colleagues actually briefed it, and I put the original slide back in. But policing. I started in the policing in the mid '70s, and the philosophy then was to flood a zone. I mean, if you had an area in a suburban setting, a lot of homes being burglarized, or in a commercial setting, you would flood the zone with marked, unmarked units, guys on foot, and sort of flood the situation with policing and hope that would work. We didn't have the technical overlays that we have today. And the technical overlays today, I mean, you go to a place like London, and I was privileged to work in the UK when I was with Abbott Labs for a couple of years, I believe from 08 to 09. It's just amazing how every square inch in London is covered by some sort of CCTV. And if you dare drive into the congested area, by that evening, you'll be notified that your license tag was noted, and you have to pay the congestion tax. We didn't have that in the '70s, so there was a lot of footwork, a lot of reliance on informants and sources, and that's why I mentioned the growth of Russian organized crime in this bullet. And you go like, what does this do? Well, in this instance, the Russian organized crime teams that were locked up by Nassau County Police Department basically inspired my involvement in that particular case. And what happened is they called me out. It was in a different precinct. The FBI was interested in these characters, and there were 4 people. And they basically said, you're a Russian speaker. Please respond and see what you can detect. See how you can assist. And in the end, I was doing the interviews, and then the FBI, a couple of the agents asked me to re-interview some of the other people that were interviewed by them. In essence, after that, I was hounded into applying to the Bureau. The Lufthansa heist, JFK Airport. Why do I mention this? Well, it was in 1978, and millions of dollars of cash and valuables were taken, and it's only one guy, an insider, that was involved. Try today, after 9/11 and after TAPA and what you do, and after what many companies do in regards to CT-PAT, try to get close to an airport. Forget about it. You'll be shot. It's just amazing how things have tightened up, and the posture is completely different. 1980s to the 1990s, there were a lot of enhancements in the technical overlays. I was privileged to work in New York office of the FBI at that time, and I was able to meet Jim Kallstrom, who's just the supervisor in charge of special operations group, I think a couple of squads, and eventually Jim Kallstrom grew that to an entire division. And they were the group that basically facilitated the organized crime investigators to take down people like John Gotti and others in the realm of organized crime. And as I go through this journey of supply chain and how you are impacted by it, and how you actually pick up fragments of it and build this vision in your mind. In 1993, I had a neighbor who basically told me, hey, listen, I got a guy, a printer, large operation, a Bulgarian fellow walked in and he provided him very specific paper to use and very specific inks to use, and also samples of what appeared to be labels, and he showed me the labels and said, well, wait a minute, these are tax stamps, basically, that are applied to the top of alcohol bottles. So I took that information, and at that time, we didn't have an office in Bulgaria. That is, the FBI didn't have a presence at the embassy there. We did have people at the legal attaché office in Athens, and they ran with the lead. And the reason I mention this case is years later, working in the FBI office in Kiev, Ukraine, I was able to assist in a massive investigation being conducted out in New York, involving Russian fellows that were moving hundreds of containers of alcohol from the U.S. into former Soviet Union. So it's interesting how the data just collects. And in fact, that was the Red Fleet investigation. And what they did is they disguised the bills of lading, and they said, this is not grain alcohol, this is floor washing fluid, or perhaps men's cologne, and they would basically dye the grain alcohol. And what was interesting here is while in Ukraine, I worked with the SBU, the old KGB, in order to get me information and confirmation of the shipments, because we knew, the bureau knew in advance what was going on, and so we were able to go to these different ports and identify the arrival of these ships. And in the end, we brought evidence back. U.S. Embassy in Moscow in 2000, I was there and attended an American Chamber of Commerce meeting, and Unilever had suffered some losses because there was a fake factory in Moscow manufacturing their product. Even though it's a British company, I volunteered to assist, and in the end, I was told by a friendly prosecutor that, listen, they shut the operation down there at the former military facility, but I wouldn't be surprised if it moved on. Now, something a lot closer to today, and involving a company I work for, and this again happened in this time frame, November. Late October is a critical time, I think, for the industry, for our industry, and the freight industry, and the security industry, because of the amount of activity in moving cargo. Basically, there was a company that was created in Poland, and they registered legitimately through a law firm, and while they were established, they stole about 10 loads, and it was an interesting case. And I thank Joanna Pachesniak for doing all the deep dives that I requested, always in the end to see if we can locate the two Ukrainians in Ukraine, and it just didn't happen. Risks of supply chain in Eastern Europe. Although I've been out of the organized crime theater for a number of years, the more things change, the more they remain the same. COVID obviously is going to have an impact on carriers and related activities. The border crossing facilities are critical as far as making sure that they are secured for any shipments. Tepid law enforcement. It's so true. You may have a great case, you might have the facts, but it's not going to be accepted either by a friendly government in Eastern Europe or Russia or Ukraine. It just sort of hits a dead stop when you try to get in there and get an investigation done. Misspelling there, it's ongoing warfare, Eastern Ukraine since 2014. In my view, this is going to have an impact on Eastern Europe, and I think the rest of Europe already. There's some clamoring of alleged immigrants that are trying to penetrate the border from Belarus into Poland. Again, that's just going to cause a lot of upheaval and potential threats to any supply chain. And don't forget, there's been an active war in Ukraine, 15,000 killed, 1.5 million displaced. Again, that's going to put a lot of pressure, not only on borders, but everything that you and I do in regards to protecting shipments and cargo. Hotspots remain and always will be points of entry, airports. So know the people that you work with, and I know the TAPA process is such that you do drill down and you ensure that they are who they are. Likewise with CTPAT, and likewise with this program that my company uses, a large pharma company, and with Resolver and auditing is the way to go. And once you get the buy-in from the vendor or the internal people, you'll see how it improves movement and how it secures and makes your product safe. Alarm systems, multiple redundancies, cross-border cargo crime by Eastern Europeans. I mean, e-crimes. Siri was an e-crime. In essence, it created an entity and it was all bogus. And by the time you catch up to them, they've already disappeared with 8 to 10 loads. Organized crime out of Europe. I mean, the last I checked, the Red Dawn, Semyon Mogilevich is still alive. I think he's 77 or 78. Very active in all activities, money laundering, prostitution, gambling. There's a large gambling case now out of Brighton Beach, New York. What was recently concluded in 2018, the DEA, the local police were involved in investigating an illegal gambling operation, moving millions of dollars, and organized crime groups that they're involved in all the entities and all the enterprises where you can make a quick buck, prostitution, gambling, loan sharking, et cetera, et cetera. So they will target shipments and especially during this time of year. Partnering with Eastern European law enforcement. I don't think there's anything more important than that, especially the guys on the border with Ukraine and Russia, Belarus. I think it's important to get to know them, and so that when you do have an incident, at least you're going to have a friendly face to call and a turn to. There's also the International Law Enforcement Academy in Budapest, and I'm sure they would be amenable to any contacts by anyone in Europe, especially, to see if they could build a linkage to a law enforcement entity. Best practices. I'm speaking to the choir really when I go through this, and I think a lot of these are are also related to what TAPA does and what CTPAT does, and internally what my company does also in their auditing procedures. So and some of these things may be restricted by European law, for instance, or by Middle Eastern views of what you can do and not do as far as protecting privacy. So what's interesting is the no trespass. It's so important to set the signs up so that you could always point to it, because at times people will say, "Hey, it wasn't posted. I didn't know. I just decided to cut through this fence." But important to do all your procedures properly and completely. Business partner requirements, written verifiable processes. And probably the most important thing out of that block is contractually enforced. And that goes into what you can do as a company with your vendor company or the company that helps you either store your product, move your product, is the ability to go in and audit and make recommendations so that improvements can be done. Again, our experience with this large entity that I work for, not only with the COVID vaccine, but prior to that, for about a year and a half, we were doing hundreds of audits of anyone that touched controlled substances and high value products. And you'd be surprised how many issues are identified when you go through that process. And these aren't confrontational audits. These are let's do it together. The point of contact at the entity is sent the audit. They complete it. It then goes to the auditor, who reviews it and does a on-site review, and it's a collegial process, and in the end, it helps the vendor, it helps the company, and in the end, it secures a product for patients. Procedural security, investigate everything, any overages, shortages, discrepancies. In-transit security, and I'm sure all this will be made available, and I'm sure all you people on a call are very familiar with this, but it's just something that we need to mention. Again, business partner best practices, and verify, especially at this time of the year when everybody is moving at warp speed, or as we are experiencing all these supply chain issues. I know in the States, in Los Angeles, in the port of LA, and there are about 450,000 containers sitting at the port. I think it's about 100 container vessels sitting out there, and so I don't know if you have the same experiences in Europe. Hopefully it's a little bit smoother, but it's a problem. Training and security must become part of your culture, and fortunately where we are, it is, and it's tremendous buy-in from all the employees in the business. Legal considerations, you're all very knowledgeable of these. And preparing specific contracts for the different entities that you deal with. Shippers, brokers, and on. So in concluding, I think it's important to have enforceable contracts, have the language in the contracts that permits you to go back and do a deep dive or walk in on what your vendor is doing with your product, how they're storing it, how they're moving it, and how secure that entire enterprise is. Again, due diligence, know who you're dealing with. All right, and I know in Europe now they're very concerned about safe and secure truck parking areas, and that's been an issue throughout Europe, actually, in a vast part of EMEA. In other words, don't do this. Siri, the Polish case that Joanna Pyszczymuka helped me with, this was on their website. This is what they created. And obviously they didn't have trucks such as this. And in fact, they stole the name Siri off a boat that was parked in someone's property. So as far as statistics, let me just quickly reflect on them. And these are from Pinkerton. And this will be made available to you. But Pinkerton Intelligence relied on 20 cross-referenced variables from 3 different data sources. And they're World Bank, the Global Innovation Index data, and the Freedom House data. So this is all compiled and accumulated information. And it always appears that it's the same entities, Ukraine being up there, Russia being up there, and don't forget, some of these places it's hard to get verifiable data, and that's why it's important, if you can, or if you have a presence in Ukraine, Russia, that you actually have your security people build a relationship with the local authorities. There's just another slide. As you can see, it's over the years, it's the same entities. Again, like with Ukraine, having spent some time there, Crimea was occupied in 2014 by the Green Men, an invasion in the east. Also, you have an area between Moldova and Ukraine on the western border, which is known as Transnistria, and that's occupied by the Russian military, and there are a lot of issues there as far as organized crime possibly being involved. So with that, we're done, and that's our motto. We never sleep, and I'm open to any questions. I thank you, and I think this presentation, if it's of value to you, I think it'll be made available to you. Thank you.
Mike, thank you so much for your fascinating presentation. We do have time for just a couple of questions. How do you see the threat of cargo crime evolving in Eastern Europe over the next, say, couple of years?
I think you have so many variables to consider there. You have the economic impacts. You're going to have problems with especially in Eastern Europe, with getting natural gas and utilities. There's going to be a lot of pressure applied via maybe some sort of forced migration issues and border issues. Obviously, the political considerations can't be belittled. They're immense. And whenever a large power is having problems internally, it tries to lash out. So I think there's going to be an impact on the movement of cargo and the security of same, and I think that's why it's more so significant to really drill down and ensure that all the partners involved in the movement of cargo and securing it and warehousing it, et cetera, or solid colleagues and have been tested vendors.
It's often especially challenging to gain incident intelligence for cargo crimes in Eastern Europe. How do you think this can be addressed? How can it be changed?
I think the bottom line is interpersonal relationships, believe it or not. I mean, I still have contacts in Ukraine. After spending 3 years, actually some temporary duty time, probably closer to 4 years there. And it's that personal relationship that you build. And I think it's important that companies actually invest in that process, because in the end, it pays tremendous dividends. I mean, I can still reach out to an old buddy and go on WhatsApp, and I don't know who's listening to WhatsApp, but I can still do it, and he can still provide me some guidance. So I think it's the interpersonal relationships are so key in building better awareness of what's going on, and you want to be able to react to an incident, and that's the way you're going to have that done. I mean, it's like this Pharmaceutical Cargo Security Council that was created by Chuck Forsythe, Kevin Donovan, a lot of great people in the industry. That sort of bonded everybody together. I mean, there's all this competition between the pharma companies and products, but basically legally they were able to bond together and address the serious issues that they faced, whether it was immense burglaries, cargo thefts, and they've been in steep decline because of that collegial working bond that they created.